So, hope all of us are doing great. I'm Ernest, and I'd like to welcome each and every one of us to my channel of Ernest Sciences and Mathematics TV channel. In my discussion today, I'm going to look at the second bit of the concept of bioinorganic chemistry. And basically in this video, we're going to be concentrating on some of the terms which we're going to come across in this and the subsequent videos. Now, in this case, these terms are going to be assisting us try to understand the various concepts which are going to be developed. And of course, in an essence, they are going to assist us understand the overall role of this specific concept of bioinorganic chemistry. Now, in our previous videos, we had mentioned basically that the concept of bioinorganic compounds are going to be playing a fundamental role in, of course, ensuring that some of the biological systems are going to function optimally. And we had listed a number of some of the, of course, compounds which we are going to be considering as bioinorganic compounds. Now, we said that we're going to come across some of these compounds and try to see how they are going to be, of course, interacting with the biological systems. And in an essence, we had just defined a few concepts which were to assist us in trying to basically develop a relationship between the various aspects of biochemistry and, of course, inorganic chemistry, which are going to be the broader branches of chemistry. We had mentioned a few concepts which we said were going to be essential for us in trying to, of course, pinpoint some of the, chemical processes which are going to be involved, especially in this specific concept of bioinorganic chemistry. And therefore, these concepts are going to be described using a various range of terms, which we are going to use in this specific case. Now, I've listed that some of the biochemical processes which we're going to encounter, especially in biological systems, are going to entail a number of them, which perhaps I can just give examples which are going to remind us basically in case we come across some of the illustrations like the graph which I'm going to be using on my right side of the board. They are going to be assisting us understand the different concepts which we are going to come across. Now, we said that we're going to come across some of the, of course, biochemical reactions or chemical processes in this specific process of cell development. And in some cases, we said that we're going to come across them in our discussion on the concept of enzyme activities. And of course, I talked about the concept of homeostasis, and of course, blood clotting or coagulation. I've mentioned the concept of this specific aspect of oxygen transport and this is going to be neurotransmitter function, or neurotransmitter function, and of course mentioned the concept of mineral metabolism and the concept of nutrition in this specific case. So among others, these are some of the processes which we're going to be encountering taking place in biological systems, and especially those are going to be assisting us, of course, understand some of the terms which we're going to come across in various range of processes, which of course are going to be essential for us to understand. Now, in this case, I'm going to use this specific graph which I've given on my right side of the board in trying to, of course, understand these specific concepts. And these are going to be assisting us trying to, of course, understand the relationship between the availability, or rather the relationship between the concentration of these essential elements in a biological system and the effects which they are going to be having on an organism. So therefore, in this case, we're going to look at the first, which is going to be giving us the concept of essential elements. And in a sense, I said that from our previous discussions of this specific concept of utilization of bioinorganic compounds is not going to be by the same degree as they are going to be appearing in the Earth's crust. Therefore, we are going to expect living organisms to employ these specific elements in a different order as they are going to be appearing in terms of abundance in the Earth's crust. Therefore, we categorized elements in terms of three sets, which we said are going to be bulk elements, and we said that these are going to be elements which are going to be required in large amounts, which is especially we gave example of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, of course nitrogen, phosphorus. We talked about the concept of sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, and some of the areas which we're going to encounter this specific set of elements. Now, we said the second category is going to consist of what we refer to as trace elements. And we said these are going to be elements going to be required by the body in minute amounts. And we are given a few examples of this, which constituted iron, zinc, and copper. And of course, I specifically listed of this specific one that we're going to encounter in some of our illustrations, which is going to be blood transport in the body, and of course oxygen transport in the body, which is going to consist of this specific complex of hemoglobin. Now, in a sense, we're going to see that the last category which we had, of course, listed was the ultra trace elements, which we said are also going to be required in, of course, relatively a smaller amount in the body. And we listed a few examples which include, of course, manganese, cobalt, chromium, vanadium, nickel, of course, and molybdenum. But I may just list a few examples, and these, of course, are going to be forming a set of elements in terms of their quantities, which are going to be required in the body. Now, in order for us to evaluate the specific quantity which is going to be desirable or, of course, optimum for the body, this is going to be more elaborate from this specific graph. Now, therefore, we are going to consider essential elements as elements that, if their total absence in an organism is going to be experienced, that this is going to be causing severe and irreversible damage. Now, in this case, we are going to consider these specific elements in terms of their specific quantities, and I said that elements which are appearing in the Earth's crust using a different degree of abundances are not going to be utilized in the same degree for different types of reasons in, of course, biological systems. And in that specific case, then therefore we shall look at this specific concept of essential elements which I have said. So if we consider this to be a body just for a simple illustration, so we're going to have a body. Let's consider our element, essential element, to be element A. So in the first scenario, we're going to have this specific element of A given as such. So I'm going just to have this space. So let's consider this specific body and the element A given as such. So if this specific element is absent in the diet of this specific organism, then this is going to be causing severe and irreversible damage to the organism. And therefore, we're going to see that this specific kind of effect, which is going to be, of course, experienced by the organism, can be relieved if we introduce this specific, of course, element of A in the diet of this specific organism. And therefore, this is specific, so this is going to be absence of this specific, of course, element of A. And we're going to see that these are going to be severe and irreversible physiological effects. And if this specific element is present in the diet, then therefore this is going to be causing what we call a relief of the physiological. So this is going to be physiological effects. And particularly for this case, these are going to be negative physiological effects, which are severe and irreversible. And therefore, the introduction of this specific, of course, A in the diet of this particular organism is going to be relieving these physiological processes. Therefore, we are going to regard this specific, of course, element of A as being essential. And in some cases, we're going to see that we can have this specific element of A, which is necessary for a particular biological function, and therefore this specific element of A is going to be regarded as essential. So I've mentioned 3 scenarios which are going to assist us pinpoint which particular element is regarded as essential element, which basically we said that we can define an element as essential, consider an element as essential if the total absence of this specific element in an organism is going to be causing severe or irreversible kind of course, damage. And we had considered these specific 3 scenarios whereby we can consider the elements absent or present. And therefore, we said that if this element then therefore is present, these physiological effects which have been caused by its deficiency is going to be reinstated, and therefore this is going to be having a relief which is going to cause positive physiological effects. And therefore we said that A as well can be considered to be essential element if it's going to be a necessary or associated with a particular kind of a biological function. For instance, if I say an element A is going to be given particularly for oxygen, And as we know, one of the functions of oxygen is going to be, of course, providing for the cellular metabolism in the body, and therefore this is going to be regarded as an essential element for the particular biological function of the body, which is, of course, the concept of respiration. And therefore, we are going to consider this specific term as essential as one of the terms which we are going to come across. And therefore, we are going to see that the use of an element in its nature is going to be, of course, dependent on what we call its availability. And therefore, the concept of availability is going to be forming a second set of this specific definition that we're going to come across, that's going to be matched with some of the terms in order to come with other meanings which we're going to see later. So in a sense, we're going to see that we can regard a specific element as being available, and therefore the use of an element in nature is going to be dictated by its specific availability. So therefore, we in this specific context, we are going to refer to elements as bioavailable. And the bioavailability of a specific element is going to be depending on the specific properties of this specific element. Particularly, if I may mention one of the properties, solubility. So if this specific element is not going to be soluble in some of the solutions or cellular content, then therefore we're going to see that this specific element is not going to be biologically available. Therefore, we're going to see that it's going to be causing some of the factors which we have said, which are going to be severe physiological effects and damage. And therefore, the graph on my right is going to be consisting of a specific, of course, a dosage of essential element against the response which is going to be realized in the biological system or an organism. And therefore, we are going to see various range of terms which are going to be used in this particular case, spanning from A, B, C, and D, given as such. And I'm going to list these specific terms which are going to be describing a state of that specific graph, arrow point of a graph for the various segments of A, B, C, D, and E. Whereby we're going to see that for A, we are going to have this specific state referred to as survival. And in this case, this is going to be a state defined by this specific dosage of an element from this place to this one, whereby we are going to see that basically the element has not been fully biologically available to the organism. And therefore, we're going to see that there are going to be some of the descriptions which are going to be given for this state of A, which we're going to refer to as a survival. And in this state, we're going to see that the organism is going to be it's going to continue to exist, but it's going to be existing in a state whereby this specific, of course, element is not going to be essential, or rather a desirable quantity, and therefore it's going to be regarded as the survival stage. And for the stage which has been given in terms of B, this is going to be a state whereby this element is going to be deficient, or we can refer to this one as a deficiency, a state of a deficiency. And this specific state of a deficiency is a state of lacking some necessary elements, or whereby we're going to still have a shortage of this specific essential element of A. So in the first state, despite the presence of this specific, or rather the low concentration of this specific dosage of A, the organism is going to be surviving. But in a state of B, the organism is going to be experiencing a deficiency, which is going to be availability of this specific element, but in a shortage or a short supply of that one. And we're going to see that the stage of C, which is going to be particularly regarded to as optimal stage, or an optimal state. This is whereby we are going to experience the best or most favorable concentration of this specific organism, and therefore the organism is going to be experiencing the positive physiological effects, which is going to be, of course, experienced due to the, of course, optimal quantity of this particular dose of essential element. And therefore, we shall look at this stage of D and try to contrast it with the various other stages which we have mentioned. And this is going to be a state whereby we are going to experience what we refer to as a toxicity. And in this stage, this is going to be having an unpleasant or harmful effect on this specific organism. And of course, this is going to be a concentration of an element, essential element, whereby it has the ability to cause what we call harm, which can be given in terms of toxicity. And then lastly, we shall look at this specific last stage, which I've given in terms of lethal. And this is, of course, a concentration which is going to be having the ability to cause death, which basically means that this is one of the undesirable, of course, concentration which can be experienced in this particular stage. So this is going to be assisting us try to differentiate between various, of course, terms which we're going to come across in terms of our description of the health response against those of essential elements. And these are going to assist us try to describe the subsequent states of course, graphs which we're going to come across, perhaps trying to describe such a kind of a relationship as the one which we have given on the board. So I hope that we have understood some of the terms which we are going to come across. And I'd like to encourage our members to kindly check our description boxes for various links of other videos. Engage us in the comment section, subscribe and ring that notification bell for various updates on different discussions we are going to have in mathematics and sciences. So that is it for now, guys. Bye, God bless you. Catch us in our next video.